Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting edition of Boyographic, the show in which I, Matt the Game Boy, will talk you through the highs and lows of the Game Boy library, one card at a time. This week we'll be looking at quite a fun game. It's Bonk's Adventure. When people look back at the video games of the early 1990s, two prominent themes are at the top of everyone's mind. The first is Caveman. Joe and Mac, Chuck Rock, Adventure Island, Prehistoric Man, hell, even Mario got a dinosaur. Cavemen were essentially the zombies of the early 90s. But more loathsome than Cavemen was the fact that every platform and publisher needed a mascot. After the success of games starring Sonic and Mario, publishers seemed to misunderstand that it was quality of game design selling Sega and Nintendo's wares, not Sonic's tood or Mario's overt sex appeal, and made mascot platformers of their own. Bubsy Bobcat, Awesome Possum, Zool, and many other half-arsed characters clamoured for the attention of the casual gamer and missed the mark entirely. In light of this, you would imagine that a Caveman mascot for a console would be cause for alarm. But despite all the warning signs pointing to the contrary, it wasn't the sign of the coming apocalypse, but the start of something beautiful. You see, when Hudson launched their console, the PC Engine, they found themselves in need of a character to go toe-to-toe with the plumber and hedgehog. Thus, PC Genjin was born. The PC standing for Pithecanthropus computerus, a pun on Pithecanthropus erectus, a designation of species of early man, while Genjin is the Japanese word for, you guessed it, caveman. That sounds beautifully like the word engine. It's a pun in a pun, it's punception. But this cutesy caveman naturally needed to be gritted up when he came overseas to launch the Americanized Turbografx 16 and became Bonk. Because, well, he bonks people with his head, I guess, and it took little effort to tweak the title screen. Unfortunately, not even a lovable caveman could boost the system's popularity, and despite an amazing library of games, the Turbografx eventually fell by the wayside, leaving Hudson to publish Bonk on a variety of other systems, including the Amiga, the NES, and the Nintendo Gameboy. Which brings us to our Game of the Week. Despite its name, Bonk's Adventure isn't a port to the PC Engine title developed by Red Company and Atlas, but an original game developed by Hudson themselves. It takes aspects of the first two titles in the series, Bonk's Adventure and Revenge, and makes them into a highly enjoyable experience for everyone's favourite Nintendo handheld. When the game eventually came to Europe, it got its name changed to BC Kid. Not to get closer to the Japanese title of GB Genjin, but because in Britain the word bonk is slang for relations. Anyways, BC Kid is a game where you take control of the titular caveman and must save Dinosaur Land from the series' main antagonist, King Drool, who has kidnapped the Moon Princess. And it's up to Bonk to headbutt his way through 6 rounds of mayhem in order to save her. The first thing you'll notice about Bonk is that the game looks very cutesy, with the sprite of Bonk looking like a wide-eyed child full of wonder. This Kirby-like illusion of Dreamland is soon shattered, however, by the game's Wario Land-like tone. You must headbutt, ground pound, and yell at enemies to get them out of your way, climb walls using your teeth, and munch meat to power up in a game world that toes the line between cute and crazy at every turn. Bonk's jump seems quite limited for a platforming game of this type. However, by hammering the B button after takeoff, Bonk can prolong his jump by somersaulting headfirst through the level like a human wrecking ball. This mechanic does take some getting used to, not only as a way of scaling some of the game's later platforming sections, but also as a means of self-defense. Bonk can also simply drop headfirst into an enemy, and is a strategy you're going to have to master if you ever plan on beating any of the game's bosses. Scattered around the game levels are various pickups for Bonk, including hearts to restore energy, smiley coins for points, and meat to power up Bonk. One piece of meat will give Bonk a rock-hard forehead, meaning enemies not only take less butting, but Bonk can cause the screen to shake by simply dropping on his bonce. Getting another bite to eat or a bigger piece of meat, however, gives Bonk a mean mullet, a projectile shout attack, and makes him invincible for a short amount of time. Unfortunately, these power-ups generally only last a short while or until you're hit, but cause Bonk to look quite deranged while they're in effect. However, this is balanced out by the adorable nature of Bonk's turtle costume, which can be unlocked underwater and lets Bonk shield himself away from enemies with inside his shell. Scattered between the various levels are also Banny Banner flowers, which will send Bonk skyward into one of the game's various bonus levels. Whether it be stuffing Bonk's face or somersaulting off a plinth, you should use these bonus stages to rack up as many lives as possible. As while the game offers unlimited continues, doing so will see you lose any of your extra hearts gained throughout the playthrough. So if you want to fight the end boss and take a plethora of punches, stocking up on lives early on is the way to go. The level design in BC Kid is pretty well handled, and while the areas aren't massive, do the job in making the game fun to play. Each section is simply cleared by progressing from one end of the level to the other, passing a marked sign that leads off screen, until eventually you get to the boss of the stage. These bosses all look great and are naturally dinosaur themed. While they all, except for Spin Lizzie, follow the same need to be attacked from above, are generally quite challenging. You'll need to learn each boss's easily telegraphed pattern to hit them accordingly, as failing to do so will result in death, something that can happen all too easily. And that's another funny thing about Bonk: dying. Losing all of your hearts will cause Bonk to die in an overly dramatic way, but stay on screen. Given you have an extra life, Bonk will remain in a feigned death until you press the start button to resume. A system I love, as instead of punishing the player and taking them back to the start of the level or boss fight, Hudson let the player get on with it. Something I wish other games developers had seen and taken on board. You're especially thankful for this at the end of the game, where there's a Mega Man style boss rush to be beaten, and we'll make sure that if you got through the bosses by luck the first time, you're gonna need to beat them properly now. The game ends as you'd expect with a fight against King Drool, whose sprite is pretty impressively scaled and is visually not too far off the 16-bit version. Kicking his scaly ass will see you save the Moon Princess, and I guess in turn, the world. So well done you. The difficulty of this game is hard to pin down, as it's all really dependent on how quickly you can get to grips with the game's controls. As at first you're going to struggle, but as soon as it clicks, the game shouldn't give you too much trouble. This will also affect the playtime of the game, which can be anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours, depending on your skill level. Apart from the visually impressive enemies and backdrops, the game also sports a score that I really enjoyed listening to on my playthrough of the game. It was upbeat and cheery when it needed to be, and eerie when the tone called for it, grounding the player in the world of Bonk with great ease. It's the subtleties of Bonk's adventure that make it a great game. As someone who never had the joy of playing the game as a kid due to its limited European releases, the mash of tight gameplay, great visuals, and Dreamland-esque score make it a great cornerstone of any Game Boy collection. While its controls may seem a little sloppy at first, you'll soon get to grips with them and wonder why more games don't see you somersaulting through the air forehead first. The visual style is the equivalent of a sweet and sour meal. At times it's equal parts Japanese kawaii and John K, towing that line without ever becoming too gross, which is something I really loved about the game. Due to Bonk's legacy and its limited release in Europe, the game generally sells for around the same price as a Mario title. However, it is by no means a rare title. So if you have the means to pick up this classic title, then I encourage you to use your head and do so. And that brings us to the end of another Boyographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please subscribe to the channel and encourage others you think might be interested in Game Boy titles to do so. It's how the channel gets around. If you have liked the video and you are not a subscriber, then why not check out some more about Boyographic videos, where I look at the highs and lows of the Game Boy library one cart at a time every week, and that may encourage you to subscribe. You can also check out some of our Boy Curious videos, where I look at bootlegs and oddities for the Game Boy system, and also some of our All the Glory videos, where I play through a game cutting out all of the deaths, leaving you with none of the faff, but all of the glory. Until next week, Game Boys and Girls, it's goodbye from me, game on.